Holy City Center Radio. This is episode 329, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Wednesday, January 14th, 2025. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. I hope you all are having a great week so far. Hopefully, I've got my technical difficulties figured out. Had some issues, as you may remember from the last episode. Thought I had fixed the issue, and I did fix the issue I had for the episode before, but then forgot to change a setting, and so it was the show was recording from my computer microphone versus my nice, more professional microphone. So the episode might not have sounded as clear as it sometimes does, but it is what it is at this point. What do you want from me? Hopefully you're not expecting a lot. And if you've been listening to this show for any number of episodes, you know not to expect a lot. I hope you are having a good week. As I said, if you're looking for any plans, go to holycitycenter.com/calendar. Around the holidays, I don't get as many emails from PR teams or, restaurants, venues, whatever, Normally, I get tons of emails every weekday about all manner of things going on in the city and surrounding area and sometimes the state and beyond. And it slows way down during that Christmas to New Year's stretch. So after, not having a ton of announcements as far as shows and other events, whether they be at restaurants or otherwise, finally starting to get all those coming back in over the last week. So a lot of new things have been added to the calendar and continue to be every single day as more and more things are announced. So be sure to check that out. Also, as a reminder, Best of Charleston nominations are open. This is the Charleston City Paper's annual awards. First, you nominate, an entity, whether it's a person, a place, a restaurant, a stylist, a chiropractor. I mean, the list goes on. There's a category for just about everything. And you can nominate on the hundreds of categories, every single one if you want to, or just one or two. It doesn't matter. But I would appreciate if you are planning on voting, or, if you just want to do one little vote for Holy City Center, I greatly appreciate it. There's a few categories that HCS may fit into. Best local podcast, of course. You're listening to Holy City Center Radio right now, so why not go ahead and nominate that show? That would be great. The other two categories at Holy City Center, the website and, its social media channels, kind of fit into is best lifestyle influencer and best foodie influencer. I don't really consider HCS to be an influencer platform, but that's a matter of opinion, I guess. What officially is an influencer? But those are the closest things that Holy City Center fits in now that they've done away with some of the older categories like best blog and so on and so forth, which I talked about in the last show. But whether you think Holy City Center fits in those other two or not, that's fine. I do appreciate the nomination for podcast, and there's a link in the show notes to give you more details on how to vote. It's easy, and like I said, you do not have to nominate people in every single category. You can just do the Holy City Center ones if you want, or a handful, whatever. You don't have to do the whole thing, which would be a daunting task. I think I tried it once. It is a lot. Putting aside the fact there's so many categories that I have zero clue who to nominate. So I try to stick to just the ones I know nowadays. But that's it as far as what's going on around Holy City Centerland. Nothing really else to report. It's been kind of quiet otherwise. So without any further delay, let's get into the latest news. Unfortunately, some sad news broke on Tuesday. At least that's when I saw it. I don't know if it came out Monday night when I was in bed, but I woke up and saw the news that Nathalie Dupree, who was a Southern cooking icon that authored more than a dozen cookbooks, died on January 13th, so Tuesday. So it was, at some point during the late evening or early morning that it happened, and the news came out shortly thereafter. But yes, she died on Tuesday, January 13th in Raleigh, North Carolina. She was 85 years old. Depending on how long you've lived in Charleston and how much you pay attention to the food scene, you may be familiar with Dupree and her work. She was a former recipe columnist for the Post and Courier. She's also considered a pioneer of, quote, new Southern cooking that came out more than, say, 4 decades ago. And as the Post and Courier put it in their article, that blended regional ingredients with French and Southern cooking techniques. Even more impressive, she was a three-time James Beard Award winner. Just an incredible career. She actually started as a politician. I didn't know, or being involved in politics. I didn't actually know that part of her history, but you can learn about that and some of the the things she's a little bit more famous for as far as cooking and all that via the link in the show notes. She was survived by her husband Jack Bass and their four children. So definitely sad to lose her. She was big in, as I mentioned, in Southern cooking. So not just in Charleston or South Carolina. She was well known, especially throughout the Southern states. But she was often involved with stuff going on here in Charleston, whether it was events or being interviewed, or she released a book, cookbook. Maybe she was doing interviews in town and things like that. So certainly a lot of people who will be upset about this news, and hopefully her family, friends, and fans for that matter are doing okay today. All right, coming back to a little bit more super local news here. City of Charleston specifically, their 2025 budget was released and included a parking price increase that unsurprisingly has some people a little upset. Yes, of course, people who are just visiting downtown Charleston aren't going to like it, but people who work and study there, food and bev, for instance, and of course, students at College of Charleston, they're the ones that could really feel that cost as they are constantly downtown. This is a daily or close to daily experience for those types of folks, unlike, say, someone who's just coming down to see a show or go out to eat or what have you. So, but it will affect everyone, of course. The parking rate increased from $1 for every 30 minutes, or obviously that would equate to $2 per hour, to $1 for every 20 minutes, which will now equal out to about $3. Not about, it'll equal out to $3 per hour. So it's a dollar increase per hour. Again, that might not seem like a lot, and obviously a dollar in and of itself on its own, not a big deal. But consider, again, food and bev workers or anybody who works downtown in any capacity. Obviously there's all sorts of other jobs downtown besides food and bev. And of course, students, that dollar each time they need to park, that's an extra dollar per hour. So if they're there for multiple hours, obviously that's going to mean even more money's coming out of their pocket. And if they have to park there multiple times a week, which obviously is a very likely scenario, especially for anyone who works downtown, that's going to add up every day, every week, month, and so on. So that can be a big increase. So why are they doing it? Well, why do prices increase ever? Obviously, it's just get a little bit more money that the city can use for other things. A city spokesperson said that Charleston has not raised hourly parking prices since 2008. So obviously, it's been a long time since there's been any sort of increase, and that this raise would put the spots, these parking spots here in Charleston, closer in line with other private parking options. So, the city is just one of their reasoning. One of the reasons they gave, was to say, hey, if you were to park in a private garage or a private space or whatever versus a city-owned spot, you're going to be paying about this rate anyway. So, all right, that's the reasoning. It's been a long time since there's been an increase, and it's just coming in line with what what the private entities are charging. Now, it obviously will create revenue. They're projecting that it'll be $4.8 million in extra revenue per year. Obviously, a significant chunk of change. That money will be used for garage improvement projects and general city operational expenditures. So obviously, the city having more money and being able to improve, parking garages and whatever that means, whether it's construction or, have they've done over the years, not just the garages, but the, street parking as well, updating from, older technologies, the old school parking meter where you're putting in change to now you can pay with like a credit card or debit, or, there's other options as well. You can, certain city parking lots, you can, text the number. It comes back with a link. You click on the link. It brings you to a website where you can put in credit card information, debit card, Apple Pay, whatever it may be, and pay for your parking. So it could be things like that. Now that's all great. We all want everything to be up to date and taken care of. But again, is the increase in the hourly rate going to be worth it? Now, for many of us, like I said, it's not going to be a huge deal. We don't go downtown a lot necessarily. Saying we, like, there's, people who don't live downtown or work downtown, you're not necessarily going there enough that this parking increase is really going to affect you. But again, there's a big chunk of the, downtown population where it will. So it'll be interesting to see, in addition to all the other expenses related to living downtown, not least of which, of course, is rent, or, if someone owns a property, it's very expensive, as you all are well aware. Same with businesses, paying for their, whether it's rent or lease or what have you. So just another expense of being downtown, and again, tourists and visitors from other parts of the Charleston area. Hey, great, get a little bit more money for the city, but it might come at the expense that those who spend the most time downtown. In addition to the hourly increase, the city has also changed what's called their special events rate. They created this about 20 years ago, and that's when there's, maybe it's a CFC basketball games going on, or maybe the music farm has a show. So the garage that's right by it, they sometimes will just charge a flat rate. So that flat rate for special events is usually $5. And again, this is for like city operated garages. If you found a private spot, they may actually increase the rates during those times, but they're going to jump from the $5 to $10 now for special event parking. And that change is included in that expected $4.8 million of extra money in revenue. So that's not, that we're not adding on to the number I already gave you. So that's a big one for people who don't live downtown as well. If you often go downtown for shows or other events, now that parking that was $5, not too shabby to park, for several hours, is now going to be up to $10. So that can be a big jump, if you're going to be downtown a lot. So something to keep in mind as we go forward: money, 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 money. President Joe Biden is going to spend this Sunday, which is his second to last day in office, here in Charleston. The White House made the announcement on Tuesday morning. Details are very skimpy. Outside of what I just told you, they did not provide any information as far as where he's going in Charleston, why he's going to be here. So no clue. But he will be here on Sunday. No surprise that he's coming to Charleston. He is a frequent visitor to this area. He often stays out on Kiowa Island. He has been here many times over the years. He had a really close relationship with Fritz Hollings, a former politician, who was from Charleston. He also, of course, comes here because South Carolina is big when it comes to presidential primaries. He won South Carolina in 2020, which kind of put his campaign back on track and ultimately helped him get to the White House. That was assisted by Jim Clyburn, who he's also friendly with. So no surprise he's coming to Charleston, just kind of weird because we don't know the details of it. And the other fact that makes it kind of bizarre is that it's going to be a quick turnaround because he's expected to be back in Washington on Monday for Donald Trump's inauguration at the Capitol. So it makes it seem like maybe like a personal thing in some capacity. Maybe there's someone being honored down here that he knows, or it's a political thing, but not, it's like a private political event, not like a campaigning type thing. So that would be my guess. It with such a quick turnaround like that and your second to last day to office. But we honestly have no idea. So we'll see. Maybe we'll get some more details as we get closer to Sunday, or maybe we really won't know until that day and people are able to report on it. But just know President Biden will be here on Sunday, which could mean potential traffic as he travels from Joint Base Charleston, where he's apparently going to be landing, to wherever in Charleston he goes. The whole motorcade comes to town. So there may be a little bit of traffic depending on what exactly he's doing, where he's going, and when. So just keep that in mind for your Sunday. We've talked on this podcast before about Robert Smalls, his history, and the fact that a statue is finally being erected in the state capitol in his honor, and a group studying where to put this monument, which, by the way, is the state's first individual African-American, monument of any kind to be put into the state house. So there's no monuments statues, whatever, dedicated to any black people in South Carolina's history in our state house. But Robert Smalls will be the first. And the spot that group's studying where to put it, they may end up ultimately putting it in a space where it's going to be staring down at a notorious white supremacist from South Carolina who dismantled most of Small's work that he did after the Civil War. So for a little bit of background, for those who don't know, Robert Small's story, there's the very popular part, which I'm going to talk about first, which is an incredible story, don't get me wrong, but there's just so much more to this gentleman's history and how much he did for the state. Although, like I mentioned, ultimately during after Reconstruction, a lot of that was dismantled. So Smalls, he was actually born into bondage, so he didn't know freedom until later in life. He is well known nowadays because he stole a Confederate ship during the Civil War to sail his family and a dozen others to freedom. That took place in the Charleston harbor. Once the Civil War ended and he was freed, technically he was freed once he crossed the harbor and joined the Union. But after the Civil War, he spent a decade in the U.S. House. He helped rewrite South Carolina's Constitution to allow black men equality after the Civil War. And then ultimately, the country kind of overcorrected after making this progress during Reconstruction. And he fought to try to keep a lot of the changes he put in place, but ultimately it was doomed when racists returned to power here in this state and in other places. And they ended up eliminating nearly all of the gains that Smalls had either fought for directly or had actually proposed his own legislation, et cetera. He kind of, at that point in time, his history kind of got lost for a while and thankfully was, rediscovered, if that's the right word, and brought to light generations later. And now more and more people are learning about him. So the proposed monument was in the location. It was approved unanimously on Wednesday by the Robert Smalls Monument Commission. It will now go to the General Assembly, and they'll have the ultimate final say. Meanwhile, another group is working to raise the millions of dollars needed to actually make the statue and all that goes behind that, the planning and everything, and actually putting it into place. So that will still be going on as well. And as I mentioned, Smalls, the statue monument dedicated to Robert Smalls, is going to join more than 24 statues and memorials that are already at the State House. No surprise, many of those statues and memorials are to Confederates and other racists. And for whatever reason, we determine they need to stay there. The Capitol building has been in that area for 230 years. And for a good chunk of those, there's been statues and monuments dedicated to these, lesser people, from our past. So it's nice to see someone who deserves to be honored actually getting an honor and being placed in there. Now, when I mentioned before about a lot of the gains that Smalls helped fight for black people in this country, and yes, as I mentioned before, he fought for equality for black men, and equality for black women was a non-starter back then. And, because even, the majority in this country, white folks, they didn't have exactly equal rights for white women. So it was a tough enough fight as it was, I'm sure. But regardless, a lot of gains were made. And one of the people who really dug in and really was making sure that all of these rights that Smalls fought for were wiped out was someone who you may be familiar with, Ben Tillman, also known as Pitchfork Ben Tillman. He was a very strong voice behind essentially going back in time with our laws and constitution in this state. And in fact, in 1895, he was someone who led a convention to remove the South Carolina Constitution that Smalls helped update and pass. Tillman was a governor and U.S. senator who openly bragged about leading groups of white people who killed black men who had been trying to vote during the 1876 election, which ultimately led to the end of Reconstruction and the return of this all-white rule in this state and beyond, and also ended everything for which Smalls had worked, which, like I said, very upsetting, but doesn't erase what he did in terms of history. He still accomplished it for however many years each piece of legislation and the Constitution was in place before the racists came back into power. And he should be honored for that, and finally is. The statue, if approved, will face Tillman's direction at the State House. That was what I was referencing at the beginning, where he might be, his statue, that is, might be staring down a white supremacist. He'll be looking right at Pitchfork Tillman. So just an interesting location selection for Smalls' statue. Regardless of where it ends up, well-deserved honor, long overdue, and will hopefully lead to more people learning about Robert Smalls, educating themselves about his history and how it ties to our state and nation's history. Very, very interesting. I highly recommend you all looking more into his story, whether it's just a quick little Wikipedia search or actually purchasing one of the books about his life, which, again, is way more than I had time to talk about and more than just stealing that Confederate ship, as great as that is. And our last story is about the abortion ban in the state. Yes, technically, it's not an all-right ban, but like we talked about, it might as well be. At 6 weeks, which is the cutoff for an abortion in the state for any reason. A lot of times people don't even know they're pregnant at that point. The ban is extended to 9 weeks for cases of rape or incest, which, again, just doesn't really seem to be enough time. And some doctors are asking a federal court to throw out this abortion ban, and they're saying it's because it violates the Constitution. So the Post and Courier did a great job with the story, links in the show notes. And they started by this anecdote about a woman who is not named, I'm sure for privacy reasons. There's a woman that was excited to be pregnant. She was looking forward to having this child. But unfortunately, when she went to go see her OB by the name of Dr. Patricia Seal, she said that unfortunately she needed an abortion based on the advice of her kidney specialist and a doctor who handles high-risk pregnancies. The reasoning for that is the pregnancy was worsening the woman's chronic kidney dysfunction that she had. So by staying pregnant, she was putting her own health at risk, and not just in a minor way, in a potentially major way. And the abortion was the best course of action based on her kidney specialist and a doctor who handles high-risk pregnancies. Well, because the woman was more than 9 weeks pregnant, her doctor, Dr. Seal, who is based out of Columbia, couldn't perform an abortion unless the patient satisfied certain exceptions that are made under the state abortion ban. One of those exceptions is, making, if the health of the mother is at risk, then the doctor is allowed to perform an abortion. However, a doctor can't just say, this is what's going to happen in, X amount of days, so let's do this abortion now. They actually have to wait to actively, the thing that they're worried about happening is happening. So despite her health risks, Dr. Seal wasn't able to intervene until the woman was actually on the brink of needing dialysis. So even though they knew this is coming, this is what all indications were. Doctors obviously deal with diseases and medicine, and they know timelines, and they know what will lead to what. Not all the time, of course. There's always going to be medical mysteries, or some things might be in a day, some things might be in a week, but it depends on the person. But they knew at some point that she was going to need dialysis, and it was going to be needed before the baby was born. Again, necessitating an abortion. But they couldn't do it until she was on the brink of needing dialysis and a certain marker was made. Finally, at that point, the law's exception was triggered because now she was officially being at risk of substantial or irreversible impairment to a major bodily function. So that's the trigger. So even though they knew it was coming, they had to wait until she was on the brink of it before they could actually perform the abortion, which, of course, is ridiculous. And not just on the face of it, it's also ridiculous because it's putting the woman at even more risk of danger. For instance, the delay in performing that abortion accelerated the woman's kidney disease, which now, she said, could require the patient to undergo an organ transplant. They knew this was going to happen, but because the state law had to wait until a certain point before they could perform the abortion, and because of that, this woman might need an organ transplant now. Whereas if they were able to do the abortion the day she walked in or whatever, 2 days later, setting the appointment, blah, 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 whatever it takes, depending on the location she goes to, everywhere's a little different. Now, because of that law, she might need an organ transplant. How is that acceptable? Doctors here have a point. Doesn't mean that people have to back off the 6-week ban if that's what they want to stick with, but at least make it easier for doctors in situations where they know the health is going to deteriorate. Why do we have to wait until that moment? So in any event, the story I just mentioned, Dr. Seal and 4 other South Carolina OBGYNs brought that story and other talking points and filed and put them in a legal complaint that was filed on January 8th. They now are taking it to federal court and asking them to throw out or at least limit the state's abortion ban. The exceptions in that ban, which went into place in 2023, according to the doctors, the ban is unconstitutionally vague, which makes the law hard to enforce, which you just heard. Like, if they did the abortion a little bit earlier, that doctor could have gotten in trouble based on how things are set forth, even though ultimately the same thing ended up happening. Now, the doctors also specifically pointed to exceptions related to the pregnant woman's health and also deadly fetal anomalies. A third exception is a woman being less than 12 weeks pregnant as a result of rape or incest. Sorry, I thought it was 9 weeks, 12 weeks for instance of rape and incest. And in those circumstances, those abortions have to be reported to law enforcement, which means even if the woman doesn't want to move forward with law enforcement in prosecuting whoever is behind their rape or the incest, they would be forced to, because doctors have to report that abortion, which again is very problematic as well. Violations of the ban are punishable by up to 2 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. And of course, doctors or nurses could also lose their license. So very serious consequences for these doctors. So when you have a very vague piece of legislation, which you never should when it involves something like someone's health, and if it is going to be vague, at least make it in the sense that there's more leeway for doctors, not less. But they're afraid to perform abortions until certain markers are met. Like, that story just demonstrated that. And I don't see how anybody, regardless of what you think about abortion, how you could see that as acceptable. No one here is saying, hey, legalize abortion for everyone, no limit, or anything like that. I'm not even saying we need to go back to Roe v. Wade, even though my personal opinion is that's should have never been overturned, and that's what we should be at in this country. But this argument isn't even about that. This is about, if you want the 6-week ban, fine, whatever, you already have it, but you have to make it make more sense. It has to be clear, and it has to work in a way that doctors and nurses aren't afraid to do medically necessary abortions, such as the one we've talked about here. It's just ridiculous. And, there's no way that a court, whether on the federal level, like the Supreme Court, if it got that high, or any other federal court, there's no way they're going to just throw this out. I have no expectations that they're going to throw out the law, but hopefully, however it has to work, it will lead to a change so doctors and nurses can make the best medical decisions necessary for patients, not put them at risk. And that means the pregnancy or the pregnant person. Obviously, neither of them should be put at risk. But when a woman is going to have chronic kidney dysfunction, or already has chronic kidney dysfunction, and the pregnancy is making it worse, and doctors say, we need to have an abortion, this is not going to be good for you to continue for this reason and this reason, they should be able to make that decision. All right, sorry, got on my little soapbox there. All right, and that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have a moment, please rate, review, like, subscribe, whatever you can do with on the platform you're currently listening to this podcast on. Whatever you can do in regards to that sort of stuff, please do. It certainly helps raise the profile of the show and potentially leads it to other people discovering it and downloading, and that's all good stuff for me and the show. One last reminder, please go to Best of Charleston via this Charleston City paper. There's a link in the show notes. You can also go directly to their website and vote. I should say nominate. We're not at the voting part yet, but nominate Holy City Center for any category you think fits. And again, there's more details in the link in the show notes if you need a reminder. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. Hope you have a great rest of your week. I'll be back with you in just a couple days. Until then, good night and good luck.